Hello, 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 hello,
Hello.
hello. Hi.
Hi.
Hello, hello. Hello. We are going to go through the new options that are pretty much confirmed for Tasha's. At this point, they are basically going to be options that will be allowing for players to select in addition to the classes that are already published because they are all but locked in for the release of a published book, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, that's going to come out in late November. And since the timing is awkward, basically any time that Wizards gives us something that we absolutely know for certain is going to be published in that book, we will present it to all of you. And as an added bonus, I've recently become aware of certain things that were leaked to the Adventurers League rules. And for those of you who are not familiar with Adventurers League is basically a it's basically a shared communal like D&D experience option for players who just want to pick up and go at their local game store. It's nowhere near as involved as ours, and nowhere near like as customized, but it can be nice for people who just really want to play some D&D. So it's kind of their version of the DTU. I say their version of the DTU, ours is pretty much our version, Adventures League. But the point is that the rules that they release for that are probably what's going to go into the book verbatim for things like how they're handling attributes going forward, kind of like the heritage system that's been talked about, and other things of that nature that have to do with basically your customization at character creation. So first we're going to do the Barbarian Path of Wild Magic and the Warlock of the Genie. And then once we're done with that, we'll go into the other stuff. So basically, this is me just kind of going through what they've settled on, uh, and kind of giving my thoughts on whether I think that the change was an improvement or not. I mean, not that it really matters, because we're probably still going to improve the class anyway, but mainly what the difference is and why maybe before it wasn't as polished. So, as you all know, the Path of Wild Magic is a archetype that you can select for a barbarian at third level. And typically, barbarians, once they reach third level and select that archetype, get access to two abilities that come from that archetype. And in this case, for the Path of Wild Magic, the first one is called Magic Awareness. And Magic Awareness is effectively a detection ability. It specifically reads, as an action, you can open your awareness to the presence of concentrated magic. Until the end of your next turn, you know the location of any spell or magic item within 60 feet of you that isn't behind total cover. When you sense a spell, you learn which school of magic it belongs to. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. So previously, this ability um, was the ability to cast Detect Magic at will, and basically using Constitution as your spellcasting ability for that spell. And it literally made you glow a color of your choice based on what school of magic you were detecting, you could use it a number of times equal. Sorry, I didn't know if I said it will. If I said it will, I'm sorry. It was a number of times equal to your con mod. One thing I really like that Wizard seems to be doing a lot now. Well, actually, there's two things, right? That they've adopted for pretty much every archetype going forward. If there's a limit to number of times they can do it per long rest, it used to be based around an attribute. Now it's typically based around your proficiency bonus, which is great because most people's proficiency bonuses and their attributes, like their primary attribute, are kind of linked. Like as in they tend to level at the same speed. But in a lot of cases, some of these like secondary abilities that archetypes will give you will be things that are based off of kind of your secondary ability score. Um, like say wisdom for rangers, or like basically having to split your focus, meaning like your secondary attribute isn't going to be nearly as high, so you wouldn't be able to use that ability as often. And so tying it to your proficiency bonus means it doesn't start out as high, but it will inexorably get stronger over time, and you'll be able to use it more often. And I mean, starting out with two uses, even in the first place, is nothing to sneeze at. This particular ability, as opposed to basically being detect magic, um, is just straight up you just identify magic and magical items. There's a bit of concern here that I have with the fact that it doesn't specifically refer to a divination. You know, in the past, it basically said the UA version of this was you have detect magic, and detect magic is a divination. So if somebody put like say magic aura on it, which is an illusion that can obfuscate things from detection spells, or non-detection on it, or that sort of thing, or on a person. Uh, detect magic wouldn't function, or it would give you the wrong answer. But it seems that with the Path of Wild Magic, they didn't specify that, so you're just straight up blowing straight through whatever defenses something has and identifying not only its presence but what school of magic it has on it. Um, the only caveat being it can't be behind total cover. And there are differences between something being hidden from you in plain sight versus total cover. Total cover is there has to be like an obstacle literally blocking directly between you and it. So like a wall or um, something of that nature, basically. Uh, so it's pretty strong. But then again, like I think they're counting on the fact that barbarians aren't going to be spending their time trying to figure out how to do Arcana anyway. So it more registers like a fun thing that they get. It's just super instinctive. The barbarian will never be able to cast Wish, but they can smell magic, which I'm kind of okay with. That's pretty interesting. As far as like things that are overpowered goes, is not very high up there. The next thing is Wild Surge, which is basically that every time that you rage, when you enter your rage, you roll on a wild magic table. Now, not the wild magic table. In the first reading I went through of this, I thought I read it. It literally said, "When you enter your rage, roll on the wild magic table," and I was like, "Oh no!" But they were referring to the one that's specifically in this archetype, not the one that you know from Wild Magic Sorcerer, which can be any number of things, like casting fireball on yourself, turning yourself into a potted plant, that kind of thing. So as before, when it was UA, it was a D8, and now it's still a D8. But they've changed some of the things that it does to reflect like the playtesting, of course, which I really appreciate because some of the things that it did before, like there was one where um, you would conjure a bunch of basically aberrations around you called flumps, which were basically like imagine a jellyfish that floats around in air with like little eye stalks on the top of its head. Little benevolent, kind of neutral to neutral good sort of little creatures would pop out from you somewhere and then fly off in a random direction, which you'd have to roll for, slowing things down even more, and then explode. Potentially just like leveling your own party, blowing up in every direction. I know that sounds interesting. I can hear it right now. It's not super compelling, especially from the perspective of a DM running a game for 8 people. So I'm glad that they decided to tamper down on it. So that ability for now, like basically when this person enters the rage, it would be an intangible spirit, which looks like a flump or a pixie, your choice, appears within 5 feet of a creature of your choice that you can see within 30 feet. At the end of the current turn, presumably yours, the spirit explodes, and each creature within 5 feet of it must succeed on a dex save or take d6 force damage. Until your rage again ends, you can use this effect again on each of your turns as a bonus action. So you basically just get these little like pixie bombs or flump bombs every turn, which that's pretty thematic. And you get to control where they go and where they appear next to someone, so you can kind of like control who gets hit by it, which is I think much better than them just flying off in random directions. If for no other reason than because that's a lot of work. It's a lot of housekeeping. But it has other stuff like flowers and vines temporarily grow around you, causing difficult terrain. Until your rage ends, you gain a +1 bonus to AC as like multicolored protective lights appear around you, and your allies gain the same bonus within 10 feet. Um, you teleport up to 30 feet to an unoccupied space you can see, and until your rage ends, you can continue to use it as a bonus action. This ability is actually really cool. Um, Basically, each of these abilities are things that either have a strong effect at the very beginning of the fight and last the whole fight, or things that happen every turn that you spend a bonus action doing. And it you don't get to pick each round which one of those. You don't re-roll. It's just the first time you enter your rage, you roll in the chart, and then you just keep doing that thing, which means that it might change like how you fight, which I think is really compelling, and it's very like that's the kind of chaos I like, where it's like, all right, I'm going to introduce a little bit of chaos, and now it's still up to you to see how you apply it. The next ability comes at 6th level, because that's when barbarians get their second archetype ability. Uh, and this is the one that gave us a lot of pause when we were trying to determine whether or not we wanted to apply it to or to allow it in season one. And the main reason for it is because this feature basically gives spell slots back. And it looks like it still does, but not as strong as it used to be. To give you some comparison, the original ability was called Magical Reserves. At 6th level, you can channel the magic surging inside you to other creatures. As an action, you can touch a creature and roll a d4. The creature regains a spell slot of a level equal to the number rolled. If the creature you touch can't recover a spell slot of that level, the creature instead gains temporary HP equal to 5 times the number rolled. And then you take force damage equal to 5 times the number rolled. And when you reach 14th level in the class, you increase the die to a d6. That means that basically, as a a barbarian of 14th level or higher, which people were generally around that level by the time that we got to figuring out if we wanted that in the season one. That would have meant that basically for the modicum price of paying up to 30 force damage a hit, which say a bear totem barbarian could ignore half of, you could regenerate up to a 6th level spell slot on an ally. And the Magic Reserves ability was tempered by, it didn't have a number of uses. It was tempered only by the damage you were taking, which if you had a healer in your party, who cares? You just keep doing it over and over and over again until you'd regenerated everyone's spell slots. And, if you had a healer in your party, as long as you're regenerating their healing abilities, then you're fine. This was not a class ability that was tempered as you would usually see by the number of uses per long rest or number of uses per short rest. It was purely based around damage you were taking, which is a big no-no. You don't balance things like that unless you put some sort of caveat on the ability, which is like this damage can't be healed except outside of a long rest or something like that, which they definitely did not do. So with the new ability that replaces magical reserves, it is called bolstering magic, and it is limited to a certain number of times per long rest, but it isn't just limited for you, it's also limited for the people that you're helping out. So to be more specific, you harness your wild magic to bolster yourself or a companion. As an action, you can touch one creature, which can be yourself, and confer one of the following benefits of your choice to that creature. Either for 10 minutes, that creature can roll a d3 whenever making an attack roll or ability check, and add the numbered roll to the d20 roll. First of all, I've seen people basically saying, why is it a d3? It should be a d4. It should fit in with like bless and guidance and all those other abilities that are d4. Well, you have to keep in mind, first of all, it stacks with them, uh, which is huge. Anyone who's played a character with either of those abilities, either guidance or bless, knows the impact that can have. And this is for 10 minutes, no concentration. You just get a D3 to every ability roll and attack roll you make the whole time. So it's not expended. Bards eat your heart out because it's basically like taking bardic inspiration and just spreading it out 10 minutes, which is huge. Um, and then the other ability, and this is the one that regenerates spell slots, is roll a d3. The creature gains one expended spell slot, the level of which equals the number rolled, or lower, the creature's choice. Once a creature receives this benefit, that creature can't receive it again until after a long rest. So that's where it's tempered. So basically, it's limited to a D3 now. It's no longer a D4, potentially a D6. It's first through third level spell slot. And they have the option to regain a spell slot that is lower than that level if relevant. Like if they only had a second level spell slot and you gave them the third, they would just get the second. And no one creature can gain this spell slot back from this ability until like they can't regain another spell slot until they've long rested, and it's on them. So that means you can kind of spread it out to everyone in your party. You can be like, you get it, you get it, you get it. But there is another limiter, which is that you can only take this action a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. So a sixth level Wild Magic Barbarian would be able to do it 3 times to 3 different party members, so once to each of the 3, or themselves, and any combination of those 2 abilities, which is still pretty strong. A D3 is huge at low levels, but it's still good even at high level. Bless is still very powerful even at high levels. So I think they did improve this ability a lot, and I don't think that anyone should have any room to complain. I feel like this is, like, so far, just these first 3 abilities that this archetype gets, it is strong. It is a very strong class. And I should expect a lot of people to play it. The 10th level ability, which, archetypes always give you an ability at 10th level for barbarians, is called Unstable Backlash. The one that they previously got was called Arcane Rebuke, which was like a defensive measure. And it basically said that anytime you made a saving throw while you're raging, you could use your reaction to deal 3d6 force damage to the creature that forced you to make a saving throw. Which is hilarious because clearly they intended it for like someone casting a spell on you in combat, or someone trying to force you to make a save versus like fear from like a class feature or a racial ability, or something along those lines where you could actually like see the other person and just like magic would shoot back at them and like hit them in the face. But this ability has no range, so someone could try to cast Dream on you from like the entire other side of the planet and you deal 3d6 force damage to them if you've made your save. But you'd have to be raging when they tried it. So, I mean, obviously, Dream, that's a terrible example. But, like, the point is that there's no, like, distance to it, which is just weird. And also, I mean, and I guess more importantly is 3d6 isn't much of a deterrent. It's more like a slap in the face. That being said, it doesn't require that you succeed or fail in that saving throw, so that was interesting. Meaning, like, somebody could like hit you with a whole person and then you'd be held. Actually, no, that wouldn't even work. Yeah, I was just thinking maybe like an ability that they would have to concentrate on, and you could hit them with a saving throw. But like when it comes to stuff like whole person, you'd be paralyzed, which means I don't think you can take actions, including reactions. So again, apologies, but I mean, potentially there are some options there. Like if somebody hit you with fairy fire or something like that, you could force them to make a con save to maintain concentration on the spell like immediately. So there's some potential use for it, but it looks like they basically tried to go back into a more chaotic, more wild magic option instead. It's still a defensive feature, but unstable backlash is when you're imperiled during your rage, the magic within you can lash out. Immediately after you take damage or fail a saving throw, you can use your reaction to roll on the wild magic table and immediately produce the effect rolled. This effect replaces your current wild magic effect. So uh, that means, because barbarians, by most definition, are usually getting hit every turn. That means pretty much every turn you could be spending your reaction to immediately gain the benefits of a different wild magic effect. Which, it's a roll of the dice. If you're, trying to game it, then, maybe if you don't like the one that you're on, you'd be like, oh, well, this guy hit me. Let's go flumps. Like, come on, flumps. Uh, but typically, the people who are going to be attracted to this particular class, they're just going to be like, anytime they get an opportunity to roll in that chart, they're going to roll in that chart. So, big surprise. And who knows? Maybe luck will be with you, and you'll roll something amazing for whatever's happening to you. So the 14th level ability is called Controlled Surge, and it's pretty much the same. The one that happened before was called Chaotic Fury, and it basically said as a bonus action you could re-roll on the Wild Surge table, replacing your current effect with a new one. It would cost you your bonus action. In this one, it is whenever you roll on the Wild Magic table, you roll twice and choose which of the two abilities to gain the effect of. And if you roll the same number on both dice, you get to pick any one of the 8. So, I think it's a pretty neat capstone because, if the whole point of taking the Wild Magic Barbarian is that you want to be doing all of this stuff all the time, having even more versatility with the thing that you really want to be doing all the time is pretty cool. Time will tell if these effects are strong at high levels, but I think it's worth going through the list real quick, just comprehensively, to see if maybe something jumps out. The first one is Wild Magic. The first one of Wild Magic, I should say, the first magical effect is each creature of your choice you can see within 30 feet of you must make a con save or take d12 necrotic damage, and then you regain temp HP equal to d12 plus your barbarian level. That's pretty good. It could suck for well, actually, it's of your choice. Actually, you know what? It doesn't suck for your party at all. That's actually pretty strong because you're basically just doing this like D12 burst. Um, Now, however, it is a Constitution saving throw, which creatures are typically pretty strong at. It's typically like I think Dexterity and Strength saving throws. Like all the physical ones are typically the ones that are easiest, but I think it's like Con then strength, or strength then con then dex, something like that. But so a con save isn't super impressive, but you're forcing everyone within 30 feet, and you're going to gain temp HP regardless. So it kind of doesn't matter. It's kind of just like a little, little boost, which is kind of the whole point. The second one is the teleporting 30 feet to a space you can see, and you can just keep teleporting every round as a bonus action. You just free Misty Step, which I don't have to tell anybody how strong that is. That's really good. Third one is the Flump First Pixie Bomb, which is I think not bad. It's a D6 force damage, but it's everyone within 5 feet. There's no or there's a saving throw, but it's it keeps happening every turn, so that's pretty interesting. It's just like a free little boost of damage. And then the fourth one is a bolt of light, shoots from your chest. Another creature of your choice you can see within 30 feet must make a con save or take d6 radiant damage and be blinded until the start of your next turn. So it's basically like a laser beam from your chest that blinds people and does a little bit of light, radiant damage with a con save attached to it, of course. Blind is a pretty effective ability. At least you get to pick who you're shooting, so you can pick somebody that you presume doesn't have a very good con save, potentially. Like a rogue or something like that. Number 5 is whenever a creature hits you with an attack roll before your rage ends, that creature takes d6 force damage. Uh, I mean, that's just immediately d6 force damage every time you get hit. And so a creature is hitting you with like multi attack, like say, some creature's got 3 attacks and it hits you 3 times, because presumably you're reckless raging, potentially. Um, it would take 3d6 just for the trouble. And it would be force damage, which is very hard to resist. Um, and then the 6th one is the protective lights that give a +1 bonus to AC to you and every ally within 10 feet till the end of your rage. 7th one is 15-foot difficult terrain from flowers and vines that grow around you. And then the 8th one is magic infuses one weapon of your choice that you're holding until your rage ends. The damage type of the weapon changes to force, and it gains the light and thrown properties with a normal range of 20 feet and a long range of 60 feet. If the weapon leaves your hand, the weapon reappears in your hand at the end of the current turn. So I guess a couple things about that. One, I presume that the light weapon quality is just there for flavor. Typically, somebody who is going to be either using rage damage or reckless attack is using strength anyway. Somebody who's using dex is probably already wielding a light weapon, so, whatever. But the thrown property is cool. Being able to just chuck that around. Obviously, changing all of your damage to force is excellent. And then just having it reappear in your hand at the end of the current turn with no requirement of like using a bonus action or anything like that, like similar abilities other classes get, is pretty awesome. So effectively, you could just basically chuck it around. And it's worth noting that although barbarians don't automatically get fighting styles, one of the things that we're presuming is going to show up in Tasha's is the ability to, or sorry, not Tasha's, but potentially one of these new feats is going to be one that will just let you select a fighting style. And if that becomes a thing, one of the fighting style options is, again, from potentially from Tasha's, could potentially be the thrown fighting style, which is that you can throw as many things as you have attacks. So, I mean, you'd only get the first one that you could chuck, like your weapon, but you could, like, pull out other weapons and throw them after you're done with your first, like, big force attack. Or you could hit people in melee a bunch of times and then throw it across the room. So, you've got some options there. But yeah, that's Path of Wild Magic Barbarian. I would say in terms of, like, strength, like, in terms of power level, like, raw, uh, like versatility, the kind of overpoweredness of its powers and things like that, I would say that this is not high tier in that regard. This is definitely high tier in terms of fun. I think people playing it would have a lot of fun with these abilities. Uh, and I think that somebody who would have a blast doing something chaotic and wild like that would probably get stuck in pretty far, and it would probably run away with their character concept. But in terms of like how strong the abilities are and kind of the things that we worry about when it comes to balance and things like that, I don't think there's anything to worry about here. I do think it's just solid. So um, I'm just trying to decide if I want to try and introduce some sort of a rating system, and I don't think that I do. I think I'm just going to say that it's solid, playable, not overpowered, and interesting, potentially fun. So we will move on to the next one. So now we're going to talk about the Genie Warlock. So this is another UA class that has been around for a little bit. I'm trying to remember exactly when the UA Genie appeared. Let's see. UA Genie was, or sorry, UA Genie Warlock was May 11th. Oh, wow. No, actually, that was really recently. The Genie Warlock came out in May of this year, so this is actually a really recent addition. And that's typically the way that it goes. If you a little bit behind the curtains as far as WotC is concerned, or at least what we believe is the case from what we've seen. If something languishes in UA for more than maybe half a year to a year, it's safe to assume that it is not going to make it into a book. Typically, they don't put the effort into at least launching something into UA without seriously considering putting it into a book, and they usually have somewhere they're going to put it. And so if they're dropping something like that and then it just sort of like 2 years on it's still sitting there in the UA section, uh, probably you're not going to see it. Or it's going through extensive rewrites and like say the Mystic, it might disappear altogether, or it might go through the ringer and then come back as something completely different. So suffice to say, like that's why we kind of moved away from doing too much UA, is because a lot of the UA stuff, it's just going to break your heart when it never comes out, kind of thing. And so, we want the published classes. But the original Genie was interesting. It basically focused your warlock around a particular type of genie, either a Dao, which is earth themed, a Jinn, which is air themed, and a Freet, which is fire themed, or a Marid, which is water themed. And the basics of the class are that you have a patron that is primarily concerned with just sort of the traditional powers of those creatures. And it originally was the case back in the day, and this is something we lamented for a while. It originally was the case back in the day that the Genie Warlock had the ability to send a creature off to be judged by their patron for a little while, which was hilarious to us. And I haven't had a chance to actually look through the one that just got published, so maybe it's in there. But from the last time I saw they updated it, they did not include that. So it's too bad. But let's see. Okay, so the first thing that you get at first level is a Warlock of the Genie. You gain the Genie's Vessel. Your patron grants you a magical vessel that gives you a measure of that Genie's power. The vessel is a tiny object, and you can use it as a spellcasting focus for your Warlock spells. You determine what the object is, or they give you a chart of things that might work that maybe will inspire you, or things that are traditionally associated with Jinn. The options they give you are stuff like your traditional oil lamp, an urn, a ring with a compartment, a stoppered bottle, a hollow statuette, a lantern, really anything that could kind of like contain something that is elemental. Whether it's gaseous, watery, like a rock of some kind, something along those lines, what you'd want to use. And so first of all, it counts as your spellcasting focus, and that'll come up later when it starts going into the things that it can also do. But basically, you wouldn't need to use other stuff. And, maybe somewhere in this class, like I'm kind of wondering about this right now, but maybe somewhere else in this class it goes into potentially being able to upgrade your Genie's Vessel so that it also becomes like a Rod of the Pact Keeper, because most warlocks without Rods of the Pact Keeper are sad. So, and I don't mean sad as in, well, actually I do kind of mean that, but I primarily mean that they are sad that they don't have that item, because anything that increases your saving throw DCs is huge, and it's one of the main benefits of playing a warlock from a balance perspective, is that you get less spells per fight, but those spells are harder to resist. So, the abilities that the Genie's Vessel gives you, in addition to counting as a spellcasting focus, is as an action, Bottled Respite, this is what it's called. As an action, you can magically vanish and enter your vessel, which remains in the space that you left. The interior of the vessel is an extra-dimensional space in the shape of a 20-foot radius cylinder, 20 feet high, and resembles your vessel. So it looks like the interior of it. The interior is comfortably appointed with cushions and low tables and is at a comfortable temperature. while inside, you can hear the area around your vessel as if you were in its space. You can remain inside the vessel for a number of hours equal to twice your proficiency bonus. You can exit the vessel early if you use a bonus action to leave, if you die, or if the vessel is destroyed. When you exit the vessel, you appear in an unoccupied space closest to it. Any objects left in the vessel remain there until carried out, and if the vessel is destroyed, every object stored there harmlessly appears in the unoccupied spaces closest to the vessel's former space. Once you enter the vessel, you can't enter again until you finish a long rest. So this was the ability that they had before, where they basically would like send an enemy, or a creature of your choice off into it. Now it seems to be primarily defensively focused, and if I remember correctly, eventually this kind of ability levels up so that you can bring more of your friends with you. Now that being said, I'm not sure if they did anything to increase like durability of the vessel. So you may want to invest in, say, an adamantine urn of some kind or something like that. I don't know. But at the very least, if the vessel's destroyed, everyone gets dumped out anyway. So watch out with your lanterns. Genie's Wrath. This is the second ability you get. Once during each of your turns, when you hit with an attack roll, you can deal extra damage to the target equal to your proficiency bonus. This type of damage is determined by your patron. Bludgeoning for the Tao, for the earth. For the Jinn, the air, it's thunder. For the Freet, it's fire, obviously. And for water-based genies, the Marits, it's cold. Okay, it does it does increase your vessel's AC and hit points, so this is good. But to focus more on the Genie's Wrath stuff, you may note that it very specifically says once during each of your turns, when you hit with an attack roll, you deal extra damage to your proficiency bonus. The Warlock Hexblade ability, the Hex Warrior ability that is basically like once per short rest, or short or long rest. Well, basically it's a 1 minute like curse on a person. That's every time you hit them with a spell or anything. Anytime you hit them, they take extra damage equal to your proficiency bonus. But that's on a cooldown, and it only lasts for a minute. This ability doesn't seem to have a limit. It literally is just once on each of your turns, you deal extra damage to the target equal to your proficiency bonus. So it's just straight up buff, which is pretty cool, honestly. But there's upsides and downsides to like different classes that more focus on like kind of bursty damage, like the Hexblade, versus classes that are like consistent damage, which like what this Genie is doing. So then it goes into and talks about the vessel's AC and hit points. The AC of the vessel is equal to your spell save DC, which is fantastic. Again, as a warlock, if you are, say, keeping up with your spell save DCs and you manage to find a Rod of the Pact Keeper, your AC can be, or for your DCs, I should say, can be up there pretty fast. It's pretty easy to hit 20 to your DC before you hit level 10, which means your tiny little vessel would have an AC of like, full plate plus a shield. And then it also says that your hit points for the vessel equal your warlock level plus your proficiency bonus, and it is immune to poison and psychic damage. So, I mean, that is interesting. That it gives it a chunk of hit points that are probably way higher than the item would actually have on its own, and that it is harder to hit in the first place. But again, like, you're not going to be focusing on like jumping into it to keep yourself permanently safe. Like, it's not like a pocket dimension, that they can't interact with the portal. It's just an object that's, in my opinion, slightly tougher and slightly harder to hit. Which means that if you're in a situation where you're going to need to use it to escape from danger, you're going to have to figure out some way to obfuscate it. And as far as I can tell, it is specifically referred to as a magical vessel, so you watch out on any of the specifics for it, but you'd have to do something to it to probably try to like obfuscate it. You'd have to cast some spells on it to literally hide it or transmute it to look like something else. I mean, not transmute, but like an illusion or something to make it look like something else. But if I was playing against a Genie Warlock, as the DM, and my monsters are reasonably intelligent and they see you pop into a vessel, even with a 20 AC and like say 30 hit points or something like that, which I think the maximum hit points this thing would have would be 20 plus your proficiency bonus, so 26 hit points at max level. I'm probably going to destroy it. I mean, it's not that hard. So expect that will happen unless you hide it somehow, or like hide it somewhere in a room full of other vessels, and they have to kill them all before they can get to it. It's a neat little trick though. It does talk about what happens when it is destroyed, because it will be. If the vessel is destroyed or you lose it, you can perform a 1-hour ceremony to receive a replacement from your patron. This ceremony can be performed during a short or long rest, and the previous vessel is destroyed if it still exists. The vessel vanishes in a flare of elemental power when you die. So that is an important note. Maybe I didn't catch it first, but the vessel is given to you. It's not something you craft, and it isn't something that you get to choose. And by that I mean like what it's made of. Your patron will give you an object that fits the AC and the hit points that the class feature tells you. So you wouldn't be able to like say get your patron to give you an adamantine one, or get your patron to like hollow out the inside of an immovable rod or something like that. Like it's very specifically, it only is what it is. So that being said, that there's no like penalty other than just waiting for an hour to get it back is okay. The 6th level feature for the Genie Warlock is called Elemental Gift. You start to take on characteristics of your patron's kind. You have resistance to a damage type determined by your patron's kind: bludgeoning, thunder, fire, or cold, again based on earth, air, fire, and water, Jinn. As a bonus action, in addition, you can give yourself a flying speed of 30 feet that lasts for 10 minutes, and you can use this as a bonus action a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus and regain them all when you finish a long rest. So basically, once you hit max level, once you get to 6 to your proficiency mod, you basically have like an hour of 30-foot movements. And at even the base level, you basically have 20 minutes total of flying, which is not bad. I mean, well, actually, by the time that you get this ability, because it's 6th level, you would have 30 minutes. So that's not bad. It's a nice little buff. The resistance is the big thing. And it is resistance to some stuff that is unusual to get resistance to. Specifically, I'm referring to the bludgeoning and thunder. It's actually like, I think the like outside of spells, obviously. I want to say it's the sorcerer, the storm sorcerer, gives you resistance to thunder damage. And I can't remember if there are any other archetypes. I mean, there's obviously the bear totem barbarian. That's always true. It's up for psychic. And then I can't think of any races that give you a resistance to thunder damage off the top of my head. And it is also difficult to get resistance to from lower level spells. I don't think absorbance is thunder, but anyway, the point is that thunder comes up rarely, but when it does, it's usually a big deal. But bludgeoning is pretty interesting. Just permanent resistance to bludgeoning damage. I mean, that would include falling right off the bat. I know a lot of people out there like to fall on things, around things, off things. But basically reducing 1/3 of all the damage in the game that's physical. Because it doesn't specify non-magical bludgeoning, it's bludgeoning. Just straight up any type of bludgeoning damage you would reduce by half. So that's really strong. And I mean, cold and fire are nothing to scoff at either. They're kind of bog standard, and honestly, fire is going to be probably more useful because more things use fire. But I mean, like, both of them could have their uses and are nice to have. Bludgeoning is a clear winner out of all 4 of those, though. Typically with stuff like thunder, you want to be the one dealing it because the monsters in the game are less likely to be resistant to it. I think the least number of resistances goes to like any kind of magical physical damage. Um, Most creatures aren't resistant to that at all. But then like right behind it is like I think like radiant force, thunder, that sort of thing, and then all the way down at the very bottom. Wait, am I going up or down? The point is that like the easiest one to resist is poison, so you want to like avoid abilities that do poison damage, generally speaking, because most creatures are like, "What are you talking about? I'm immune to poison." But thunder is good. But thunder for a player, you're probably not going to run into it a whole lot. But when you do, I'm sure you would appreciate it, like shatter or something like that. The 10th level Genie Warlock ability is called Sanctuary Vessel. When you enter your Genie's Vessel from the Bottled Respite feature, again, when you do, you can now choose up to 5 willing creatures that you can see within 30 feet, and they come in with you. As a bonus action, you can eject any number of creatures from the vessel, and everyone is ejected if you leave or the vessel is destroyed. In addition, anyone, including you, who remains in the vessel for at least 10 minutes gains the benefit of finishing a short rest, and anyone can add your proficiency bonus to the number of hit points they regain if they spend any hit dice as part of a short rest there. So, actually, this is something I probably should have touched on the first time that I was looking at this class ability. And that's like, what can you get away with, assuming that like no one destroys your bottle, right? Like, what can you do in this realm? Um, and first of all, I think the thing that's most important, like as I'm rereading the ability here, it does not say. Let me double check here. You magically vanish and enter your vessel, which remains in the space you left. The interior of the vessel is an extra dimensional space. Okay, so it is an extra dimensional space. So it's like a bag of holding. It's like a portable hole. Um, so if you have an extra dimensional space on you, you do not want to go into your genie vessel. And no one who you select to come with you should have any of those items on there as well. That would not only be a bad thing for you and them, but also would just be bad in general because it would also summon the spirit of the broom, Rokiva. Their attention would be drawn directly to you. So even if you manage to squeak by, you would probably be in a bad position as you came back to Myzelis. But it doesn't place very many other structures on what you can do once you're inside there. Also, it uh, it's a relatively very large space. I think portable holes are 20-foot radius circle, 6 feet deep. What was it? Oh, 10-foot radius, 6 foot deep. So it's much larger than a portable hole. It's not as easy to deploy and like open and shut because obviously you can only go in there once per long rest. But uh, you can do anything in there that you could do on another plane. Um, it would also separate you from things that require you to be on the same plane, so that's worth keeping an eye on. Uh, certain telepathy version or spells and things like that. Certain detection spells. If someone's casting Dream on you and you go into your genie's vessel, like to sleep, yeah, that would work. But uh, effectively, it is. It's just a bonus space for you. And also worth noting is that if you are carrying things up to your carrying capacity or whatever, if you've got stuff with you, you can drop it off in there. So effectively, it's like a portable hole. It's an extra dimensional space for you that you get as early as first level. So, it's kind of growing on me. I'm mainly concerned about its longevity, but then again, if I think about it, a portable hole is a sheet of fabric. So, it's actually tougher to destroy a portable hole. And more importantly, it's actually more like a bag of holding in this way. But like when it comes to a portable hole, if you destroy the hole, the items are lost. But if you destroy the bottle, then it just appears next to you. So, it would be a good storage space, and then you wouldn't have to worry about losing that stuff forever. So, it's kind of growing on me that you can use it for other stuff. And then, of course, having the ability to give people a 10-minute short rest is a big deal, especially for you. You're a warlock. But, again, you're going to have to be very careful about, like, defending it while you're in there, making it last the full 10 minutes. Um, and the big thing with that is that you can only, by the rules that I'm seeing here, you can only hear outside of it. You can't see. You can hear perfectly well, but again, you can't see what's going on around you. And because you're on another plane, you have to be very careful with like the specific wording of the abilities of like say familiars and spells and other things that would let you observe that space that you're not in anymore. So if you left your very important bottle on the prime material plane, on Mazelis, and you went into your pocket dimension, you wouldn't be able to necessarily see it very easily. So someone who's like stealthy, who might like beat your perception check, would just sneak up on it. Maybe they could do a lot of bad things. Now that I think about it, operating under the assumption that once the vessel is destroyed, you all get dumped out. They could throw it in lava. They could feed it to a monster, like a purple worm or something like that. Like, there's actually a lot of bad things that can happen. So, yeah, obviously they'd have to be real quiet with it, but if they can shut down your hearing, if they can cast silence and then start doing things with it, or if they're just being super stealthy, like, you never know. So, still pretty powerful to have your own bag of holding. Portable hole, I should say, at the very least, at first level. That's kind of a big deal. So, obviously, again, you have to carry yourself. And then at 14th level, and this is a big draw for the genie. This is probably like the one of, if not the most powerful individual class features I've ever read. Limited wish used to be a thing, used to be a spell back in the day. Now it's coming back around to kind of being that same thing again. You entreat your patron to grant you a small wish. As an action, you can speak your desire to your genie's vessel, requesting the effect of one spell that is 6th level or lower with a casting time of 1 action. The spell can be from any class's spell list, and you don't need to meet the requirements for that spell, including costly components. The spell simply takes effect as part of this action. Once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you finish 1d4 long rests. So it does have a cooldown. In exchange for the fact that you basically get it 3 levels earlier than Wish, which, by the way, yes, has still been included as an expanded spell for the Genie Warlock spell list, which immediately, we haven't even gotten that far. I just said I wasn't going to rate classes, but like that takes the Genie Warlock from like, well, it's pretty cool. Oh, it's kind of neat to like, it's here now. It's off the chart. It's up here with Wizard, Arcana Cleric, Genie Warlock, Sorcerer, any other class that gets access to Wish, just immediately sits up here above everyone else. Like, oh, how you guys doing down there? Fighter, you got 4 attacks. That's neat. I can make a clone of myself. I can do twice as many things. Genie Warlock getting Wish, huge. In addition to the fact that they get a limited Wish 3 levels early, that's up to 6 level spells. You can do stuff like Contingency. I think. Well, actually, wait, it's on action. Maybe. Well, anyway, there are a number of spells that you can do that have costly material components that have permanent effects. You could cast. Let's see. Let me look at spells that have. Well, I'm not going to get into it right now, actually, but like the point is that level of versatility, being able to cast that as an action and just have it be whatever spell you need, is like the most mystic of all Mystic Arcana. Like, it's really good. So, and then just on top of that, just Flight of Fancy. Why don't you also have Wish as your 9th level Mystic Arcanum? So you can't ask for more than that. Like, Warlock's save DC Psychic Scream is huge. Obviously, Shape Change, True Polymorph, those were also very powerful. But Wish is Wish for a reason. So, Genie Warlock, I would probably rate as stronger than the class that we just reviewed, which was the Barbarian. Um, Good, but clearly better. Um, and also very flavorful. I mean, for those of you who are super interested in just the flavor and don't really care about the balancing, good for you, because I also care about flavor. But the main reason that I like to say the main reason that we talk about balancing things is because uh, it does come up. So like we don't balance things in a game for people who aren't going to do crazy stuff with them. Who aren't going to go, how many simulacra can I have? So like as far as flavor goes, it's clearly fun. It's clearly going to be a fun class, just like the Wild Soul Barbarian. But I think it will also be a strong class. So I would not be surprised to see many people take this one as well. But to kind of put the capstone on these two things, because they were not just leaked, but by multiple sources and have been officially announced in this way. With the caveat, I might add at the bottom of these little PDFs, they say content subject to change prior to publication. So there is always a chance I might tweak something. These are going to be in Tasha's. So I'm just telling you right now that they will be allowed for character creation going forward. And anytime that Wizards does something like this where they strongly confirm the presence of a particular subtype or a subclass or any kind of special uh, rules or anything like that, anytime they confirm something for me from Tasha's, you can expect that we will immediately allow it once we've had a chance to confirm those sources and basically make an announcement. We will say, like with the Genie Warlock and the Wild Soul Barbarian, we will say go right ahead. So with that being said, just real quick, we're just going to go over the new Adventurers League rules for creating a new character. The new items that they went through, basically the new player's guide that they went through, is allegedly, because again, the Adventurers League stuff kind of uses like excerpts from the rule books to give people like a quick start guide. Allegedly, these are the items that are going to be in Tasha's. So keep making characters the way that we've talked about for now, but this is just kind of like a segue into what might be the wording and like exactly how these character creation rules work going forward, because we're going to adopt them once they actually get published. But effectively, what they are customizing your origin in D&D. At first level, you choose various aspects of your character, including ability scores, race, class, and background. Together, these elements help paint a picture of your character's origin and give you the ability to create many different types of characters. Despite that versatility, a typical character race in D&D includes little to no choice, a lack that can make it difficult to realize certain character concepts, and for other reasons, regrettable. The following subsections address that lack by adding choice to your character's race, and allowing you to customize their ability scores, languages, and certain proficiencies to fit the origin that you have in mind for your character. I hear you. I can hear you clacking away, already wanting to ask me if this is immediately going to be adopted. Please wait. Just because it's in the Adventurers League doesn't mean that this is going to make it Tasha's. We're thinking it will, but we're not. Again, we're not going to confirm anything until we see it from Wizards officially stating this is in Tasha's, and specifically worded this way. Because it's going to be rough enough when we get to November and it's time for you all to basically like tweak and rebuild your characters. We don't want to have to do that again before, like, between then and now, like where you're still trying to get settled into your characters. We want to have probably just 1 week of just mass rewrites, just tweaking everybody's character at once, be prepared for that. Take a nice deep breath and just get it over with, like pulling the band-aid off, and then be done with it, and just use those rules going forward. So when I say you will be able to customize your proficiencies, I mean in the future, not yet. We'll get there. But let me go into the details about that. So, uh, certain proficiencies to fit the origin you have in mind for your character. Character race in the game represents your character's fantasy species combined. I like that. They're using the word species. It's good. Combined with certain cultural assumptions. The following options step outside those assumptions to pave the way for truly unique characters. We've been trying to touch on this. We wanted to basically represent the fact that people could be against the archetype, against the assumption, as Wizards is saying here. They can basically run the gamut of all the different things that a person can be while still also being a member of that race. And it's not to say that your average elf is not lithe and dexterous and potentially intelligent or wise. It's not to say that your average orc might be more physically domineering than actually like mentally. But it's more about like, does this represent the entire race? And is this a stigma that is not just social, but literally physical? Like literally, your biology is telling you that you can't be as good of a wizard. If you wanted to be an orc wizard, uh, we just wanted to move away from that because it honestly is not everyone's fantasy. It's not what they want to be doing, and I don't think it's something that we really want to endorse. So it's really awesome. Again, not to gush too much, but it's really awesome to see this. So, and what I really like about what I'm about to go through is that they seem to have found a way to say it more clearly than I did. So, uh, let's start with the ability score increases. Whatever D&D race you choose for your character, you get a trait called Ability Score Increase. This increase reflects an archetypal bit of excellence in the adventurers of this kind in D&D's past. For example, if you're a dwarf, your constitution increases by 2 because dwarf heroes in D&D are often exceptionally tough. This increase doesn't apply to every dwarf, just dwarf adventurers, and it exists to reinforce that archetype. That reinforcement is appropriate if you want to lean into the archetype, but it is unhelpful if your character doesn't conform to the archetype. If you'd like your character to follow their own path, you may ignore your ability score increase trait and assign ability score increases tailored to your character. Here's how to do it. Take any ability score increase you would gain from your race or subrace and apply it to a different ability score of your choice. If you gain more than one increase, such as with a half-elf gaining +2 in charisma and +1 to any other 2 ability scores, you can't apply these increases to the same ability score. And you also can't increase a score above 20. So no matter what, the ability score increases from your race were, a +2 and a +1 can't become a 3. And a +1 and a +1 and a +2 can't become a 4. They have to go in separate stats, but they can be whatever stats you want. And I do provide a more specific example here. The ability score increase trait of your race or subrace increases your con by 2 and your wisdom by 1. You could instead increase your intelligence by 2 and your charisma. So, again, they're being much more succinct than I am. I wish I just read ahead. I wish I had just read ahead. Languages. Your character's race includes languages that your characters assume to know, typically common in the language of your ancestors. For example, a halfling adventurer is assumed to know common and halfling. Here's the thing. D&D adventurers are extraordinary, and your character may have grown up speaking languages different from the ones in your language's trait. To customize the languages you know, you may replace each language in your language's trait with a language from the following list, and it gives you a list that goes from Abyssal through Undercommon. DM may add or remove languages from that list, specifying which languages are appropriate for your campaign. So that last line is super important. We've already gone into extreme detail about how languages work in Season 2 in Myzelis, and we will continue to use those rules, which basically fit with what's being said here. You guys have a much larger variety of languages, and those languages are unique to the different places you visit, so that each one of those places feels more like a different part of the world where different people grew up. So, but let's get into the real meat here, and one of the ones that I think is new even to me, um, proficiencies going forward in Tasha's allegedly. Um, Some races and sub-races grant skill, weapon, or tool proficiencies. These proficiencies are usually cultural, but your character might not have any connection to the culture in question, or might have pursued different training. You can replace each of those proficiencies with a different one, as shown on the following table. The table reads, if you have a skill, you may replace it with a different skill. If you have proficiency in a simple weapon, you may replace it with either another simple weapon or a tool. If you have proficiency in a martial weapon, you may exchange it for proficiency in a simple or martial weapon or a tool. And if you have proficiency in a tool, you may exchange it for a different tool or simple weapon. For example, high elf adventurers have proficiency with longswords, which are martial weapons. Consulting with a proficiency swaps table, you can see that your high elf can swap that longsword proficiency with a proficiency with another weapon or a tool. Your elf might be a musician who chooses proficiency with a musical instrument, a type of tool, instead of with longswords. Similarly, elves start with proficiency in perception. Your elf might not have the keen senses associated with your kin, and could instead take proficiency in a different skill, such as performance. The equipment chapter of the player's handbook includes weapons and tools suitable for these swaps, and your DM might also allow additional options. I think that kind of leads into the whole thing about that sort of heritage rule that we'd gone with, where you know it doesn't really have to be about what your parents were like. I mean, you can basically choose whatever options you want, but it could be used to reflect perhaps a big difference in what your I guess the best example I can give off the top of my head is like, say you were the child of an orc and an elf. The orc has proficiency with intimidation, a half orc, I should say, has proficiency with intimidation, and the elf has proficiency with perception. You could effectively say that like your justification for taking intimidation instead of perception would be that your ancestor was also like somewhere in your tree you had someone who was a half orc or an orc, but at the same time, it's also freeing you up to just basically be like, no, my my wizard, my elven wizard, had their nose in the books the entire time and never really learned perception, and instead had investigation or had arcana or something like that. So they could basically just be focused in a different direction. And I think that's awesome because it basically is like what we really wanted at the end of the day is being achieved here, which is that it doesn't matter what your race is, you can still be the best you want to be at that thing. Or if you wanted to be good at different things than what like society tells you that you're supposed to be good at, you can just be good at those things, and everyone else can just deal with it. So that's really, I mean, that's awesome, and I hope that it makes it in. Again, not confirmed, but likely. Again, because they put it in Adventures League, there's a high likelihood that they will use the same wording and put it into the actual Tasha's. I have heard rumors, these are rumors, that they may also do away with racial requirements for, like, we had already done this for classes. Like, you can already play in the DTU, you can already play a blade singer who is not an elf. I think that's in the rules for that, but just in case you didn't know, what was that Barbarian class, the archetype Battle Rager. Thank you. The Battle Rager archetype is traditionally only dwarves, but we don't care. You can be whatever race and be a Battle Rager. And so I think they're going even further, and they're basically saying that if there's a feat that says requires a certain race, they may change that to be no longer a requirement, so you can just build your character however you want and have them look how you want, which is great. Um, the last thing that's sort of new from this AL guide is Adventurers League, sorry, guide is personality. And this is a thing that, I mean, honestly, I feel goes without saying, but again, I'm going to say it anyway because it's nice to say. And just in case any of you didn't know this, um, the description of a race and the descriptions that are given in your background as well, but primarily the descriptions that are in the race that talk about what all people of that race are typically like, you can completely. You do not have to play a bloodthirsty orc. In fact, most of the orcs in Myzelis are not bloodthirsty. We don't use race to determine what people are like. We use society and culture. So you can have a culture of bloodthirsty people, but we don't really care to tell a story about a bloodthirsty species. We don't really care to tell a story about a species that is just considered to be good. It's just not interesting to us. There's enough of that in real life. So instead, being able to basically just formally say, not only do we run this way, but the game that we love, people that run it, like the people that are producing it, also believe that race should have no impact on your personality. They're basically saying, there can be an archetype, there can be a traditional archetype, and maybe you could chalk it up to just how cultures typically play out in a lot of campaign settings, like their history is still a thing, but times change. Evolution is natural, and it is here, and I think we're all a lot better off for it. So I think this pretty much concludes everything that I wanted to talk about in this video. So again, if you have any other questions or anything you want to bring up or talk about, you are welcome to address it on the questions and answers channel in Discord, and we will get to it as soon as we can. So thanks for being here for this video, and we hope you have a good day.